So in this second essay, I want to draw together some ideas now. And in this essay, you're asked to combine a number of thoughts and ideas. So let's begin with the quote from Vardy. So here's some suggestions to help give greater scholarly strength to your assignment. Firstly, the quote from Vardy: "Truth is something never arrived at easily, but only by a struggle, by searching and willingness to be open to alternatives." So I think it's a good idea at the beginning and in your essay to quote Vardy, and therefore it's also a good idea near the conclusion of your essay to quote Vardy again. But rather than just quote Vardy, I think it's a good idea to include some more specific details on the nature of the struggle, which could include statements about the value of critical thinking, value of being well informed, and you could go to other resources to help deepen and strengthen your interaction with Vardy. There's a couple of other key ideas in Vardy's quote, including a willingness to be open to alternatives, and also the dangers of illusions and masks of falsehood, and you could comment further on those. So you could begin with a focus on Vardy's claim, and then you could strengthen and deepen the interaction with Vardy. Vardy also says that we need to live the truth, and there are other scholars who've talked about living the truth, and scholars on education who've talked about that. Soren Kierkegaard, who's an existentialist philosopher, has also written about the importance of a lived experience of truth, a subjective experience of truth, and you could talk about that. Some of you might be looking at English language, and there's an interesting comparison between English language and maths and science, in that maths and science takes us straight to truth in some ways. And in the class we've done on maths and science, we've talked about empirical truth, being able to measure using mathematics what is going on in both geometry and space, and also in mathematical equations. That gives us quite a lot of certainty in regards to truth, and science seeks to build upon this. Whereas when it comes to English language or the humanities or art or music, often there's opportunity for more subjective approaches to truth. And as Soren Kierkegaard and existentialists and other thinkers have said, it's important to balance the mathematical and scientific approaches to truth with a recognition of the value of subjective understandings of truth. You might want to explore that, or you don't have to include that, but it's possible to look at the value of the expressive, the emotive. That's more of the nature of the human person. We're not simply described by numbers. There are complexities of the human person, complexities of good and evil and beauty, and even religious studies touches on this expressive, subjective approach to truth. So you could explore that if you have time and space. Vardy also talks about the veils of illusion, the masks of falsehood, and in the class on science and history, Peter Harrison spoke about the understanding of sin that misleads us, contributed to the scientific method, and Francis and Bacon and others talked about the importance of experimental approaches and empirical approaches, because sin can mislead us, evil can mislead us, self-focus and selfishness and the nature of evil can be present. And so truth could consider the nature of untruth. So a good place to start is with the quote from Bertie. Another good place to start is with the topic subject that we're looking at, which is critical thinking. And so you could quote scholars on critical thinking, and you could also relate critical thinking to the subject area that you are looking at, maths, science, English, etc. It's a good idea to focus on one subject area rather than many. and a good idea to focus on a few specific aspects of critical thinking rather than many aspects. That'll help you to develop a stronger, deeper assignment. You could also begin, or in the next few paragraphs, look at worldview considerations, such as different worldviews, but we're looking at worldviews as they relate to critical thinking, not an extensive discussion of worldview in general. And you could look at specific worldviews such as modernity rather than covering a whole wide range of worldviews. Then you could go on and look at your subject area, and this will deepen your assignment, and you could explore the subject area, particularly the practical outworking of your subject area in the classroom. And with reference to ACARA and NESO and other curriculum documents that you have access to, you quote, what's the key focus in your subject and how does critical thinking relate to your subject area? And how do you outwork this in practice and management of the classroom, in teaching in the classroom? The essay can be strengthened by developing a focus on one specific subject area and the ways in which critical thinking relates to your subject area. And so if you're looking at language or English, you could look at how language and English contribute to critical thinking and how critical thinking contributes to language and the study of texts. You could also focus on an aspect of critical thinking or an aspect of education, such as how students learn literacy or numeracy, or you can focus on assessment or management of behaviour or special needs or First Nation, Aboriginal needs as well, or gifted education or other specific areas. You don't want to focus on too many different areas. One or two or three at the most would give you the strongest essay. You have some references in your study outline, and it could be worth having a quick look at these references. So you've got Audi on philosophy. And so if you were to do a search on scholarly resources relating to Audi philosophy, and you could even look at education, or you can go to the college library, have a quick look there, teaching, schooling. You can find other resources as well that relate to philosophy of education. And so that resource and other related resources can be useful. And you can do the same with each of these resources. The real challenge is to quickly find relevant resources for this assignment without putting in huge amounts of time, going down a rabbit trail off track too much. So there's some of the resources that we suggest that you look at and apply. And then each week in this subject, we have introduced other resources as well. When it comes to modernity, I suggest that Charles Taylor has written some very valuable work describing, defining modernity. So a quick look at that for 15 to 20 minutes to half an hour at most. We'll give you some ideas and then begin to explore them further. You haven't got time to explore everything Charles Taylor's written, but what he's written on modernity can be very valuable and useful in this essay. Remember, we're wanting scholarly resources where he's written a scholarly article relating to modernity or book, or other scholars who've written scholarly articles and books that include comment on Charles Taylor. So primary resources by Taylor and secondary resources that discuss Taylor would be useful. When it comes to the Christian worldview, again, we want scholarly articles on what the Christian worldview is. Some that I've found include Thomas Wright, N.T. Wright, on the Christian worldview, and there's a lot of others as well. Again, you want strong scholarly articles that are cited in scholarly journals and scholarly books with lots of references that you can use. Remember, this is only about worldview as it relates to critical thinking, not everything that can be found about worldview, and as it relates to critical thinking in the subject that you were looking at teaching. In terms of use of the first person, I find that can lead to lightweight work. So if you've got a whole paragraph in the first person on your worldview, that can weaken your assignment. So you want to condense that down. So I suggest you write a longer first person reflection in a diary or journal. And then you think of what's a quick way of summarizing the major influences on your worldview. So briefly write about family, culture, and your worldview, but we're looking for specifics there about modernity, about the way you think. It's very easy to write about family influences and the way you think, but we want to choose a few key ideas there that can be examined in greater depth. And the same with your Christian worldview. It's easy to say that your Christian worldview focuses on Jesus, Lord, but we want to look at specific ways in which this affects our thinking, such as our Christian worldview leads us to a holistic understanding of the human person. That is, we're not satisfied with just focusing on rote learning of knowledge. Understanding the human person realizes that we are all individual, different, etc. And you could write about that. Another aspect of the human person is that we're created good. Genesis chapter 1, in God's image. And so the goodness and capacity of the human person could be something you could write about, as well as the fallenness of the human person. That is, we fall into sin. So you can write about these concepts there, and you can cite scholars who've written on this and their application in education. One student suggested to me a 7-day plan in which they emphasized that in 7 days, you've really only got 50% of the time to focus on research and gathering material by the best scholars in the areas that you're looking at, because you've got to give another 3 days to editing and writing up the work and reworking of the work. So 3 days research with the best scholars, day 4 halfway through, reworking the structure, thinking about the best way to present the argument, 3 days writing up and editing, and then you write or rewrite the introduction and conclusion at the end, because it's only when you present your material clearly, effectively, and well that you convince the marker that you have a thorough understanding of what is going on. So there's a number of stages in this assignment. Firstly, looking at worldview, looking at Vardy's quote, looking at your self-understanding and major ideas in worldview, such as modernity and Christianity in terms of your worldview, and then your subject area. So you choose one of the subject areas that you're focusing on would be a good way to go, or an educational focus area that you're focusing on, and then you draw it all together with some practical application. How does this apply in the classroom? And then a conclusion to draw it all together from what you have presented. So any thoughts or questions from Kieran, one of our students?
No, that actually sums it up really well.
Yeah, excellent. So there's a few thoughts, a few ideas. I can put the video up. I'll put another 2 videos up on this assignment. So there's one that I put up about a month or more ago, and then there's one I've put up in the last couple of days. You might want to watch those videos. And then there's some notes here in this presentation that can help you with this assignment. So I'm sure you'll find this assignment very valuable. It's a chance to think about ways we know in our subject area, in our life journey, and how we can know more effectively, more critically. And then it thinks about how this applies in your teaching. How can you help students to know more clearly, effectively, and critically in a subject area that you're teaching? And how can your self-understanding of your worldview help you to understand your approach to life, to thinking, to critical thinking, and the ways in which you relate to students as they think about the subjects that they're studying, and they catch some of the excitement that you have for the subject that you were studying and teaching. So a great assignment, be really valuable. I'm sure you'll get a great deal out of it. But remember, put as much time into editing and reworking of your assignment as you do into researching the assignment, because if it's just general and waffled, then it won't get the sort of mark that you deserve, which only comes from reworking and editing and fine-tuning the words that you use and the sentences that you use and the structure that you use and the referencing that you use. So thank you. It's been great to catch up again, and I look forward to reading the assignments. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks again. Any last questions?
You're still recording.